Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. The Man in the Bunny Suit, submitted by Maria N. I might be one of your oldest listeners, and this happened to me outside of Peoria, Illinois in the early 70s. 1972 to be exact. My family, mom, dad, my brother, and I, were traveling from Memphis to Green Bay, Wisconsin to visit my dad's side of the family for Easter. I was 12 and my brother was 10. It was like a 12 or 13-hour trip, so my dad planned to stop about halfway on Good Friday. That was around Peoria. While my dad was a good and loving dad and husband, he was also a complete cheapskate. Looking back, he was that way because he wanted us kids to have all the good stuff in life. But when it came to trips and such, he would find the cheapest and seediest places to stay to spend money on other facets of the trip. So, he passed by Peoria in the car, with a city full of hotels and whatnot, and got us to this place called the Rocket Motel. It looked okay, but come on, how creepy are motels to begin with? Dad parked, checked in, and in we went. It was still light out, so my brother and I went to mess around in the parking lot. Some random guy there told us there was a lake on the other side of the highway and through a neighborhood. So we went and asked our parents if we could check it out, and they said yes, to be safe crossing the road and be back before it got dark. Ah, the 70s, when parents didn't care what their kids were doing as long as they were back before dark. We waited until there wasn't any traffic on the road and then crossed some railroad tracks and walked through a neighborhood and then some fields, and we came to the lake. It wasn't that exciting, and we just threw rocks in the water before the sun set, and I said we should get back. On our way back, and it was getting dark at this point, another random guy was standing in his yard halfway to the street. He looked like he was about 50, grizzled with the old-timer look, and called out, "You throwing rocks in the lake?" We were taken aback, and I replied, "Yeah." "Well, those were my rocks. Go back and get them." He took a few steps towards us. I have to admit, he was pretty creepy. Stained t-shirt and even more stained jeans. I said, "What?" And we kept walking. Then he shouted, "Go get my fucking rocks!" I told my brother to move it, and we started walking faster. Some other people came out of their houses, and another guy yelled, "Hey, Jerry, what the hell are you yelling about?" This started an argument between those two guys, and we just beat feet out of there, back over the train tracks and highway, and back to our room. We went in, and my dad asked how the water was. He was lying on a bed watching an old black and white TV. My brother just said it was boring, but there was some guy yelling at us for throwing rocks, which my mom immediately took to mean we were throwing rocks at people. I explained it to her, punched my brother, and that set us to fighting. My dad raised his voice and said, "Knock it off. Have a sandwich and a soda. Early bed tonight, we're leaving early in the morning." My brother and I shut up, ate, and then got washed up for bed. We were sharing a bed, and of course that only started another round of hitting each other before Dad yelled at us again. At that point, we knew it was us against our parents, and now we couldn't stop laughing instead of fighting. We got threatened with my dad's belt, but my dad never hit us. He always threatened to, but he never hit us. Mom turned the lights off, and everyone went to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I woke up to hear a tapping at the window of our room. That's the creepiest part of motels. The outside is literally the outside. Anyone can just walk right up to your room, you know. I wanted a drink of water anyway, so I got one from the bathroom, and when I got back to my bed, I could still hear the tapping. Rather than wake anybody else up, I went to the front window and pulled back the curtain a little, and dear God, there was someone outside our room standing there wearing an Easter bunny costume. He was just standing there looking at our door. But then, right before I put the curtain back, the figure turned its head right at me, and in the weak light of the outside lights, I saw him looking right at me. I froze. I was completely petrified. I couldn't yell or speak, I just locked up. The bunny man turned slowly and leaned right down at the window, and I heard a low, raspy voice say, "Little kids don't get Easter eggs. They get rocks." At that, I screamed out loud, and the bunny man jumped a little and then moved away from the window. My dad shot out of bed and flicked the lights on, asking what the hell was going on, and all I could say was, "Easter bunny, bad Easter bunny," and pointed at the window. "What the hell?" my dad said and went over to the door, wearing nothing but his boxer shorts. He unchained the door and opened it and stepped out and tripped over something and went to his knees. He yelled out another, "What the hell?" and I looked to see that he had tripped over a pile of rocks that had been laid at the door. Then he looked up and yelled, "Hey, you, who the hell is that?" He got to his feet quickly and took off across the parking lot in his bare feet. Now my mom and brother were awake, and they were all standing in the doorway, watching my dad run with my mom shouting, "Larry, get back here!" Other doors opened and people stepped out of their rooms, also tripping over other piles of rocks. Dad came back from the edge of the highway and said, "Lost him." The people next to us in the next room asked what was going on, and Dad said, "I don't know, but some nut is running around wearing an Easter bunny costume." Someone down the way laughed, and a woman's voice called out, "No, he's serious. I saw him too. He was looking into our window." Her husband said, "Why didn't you say anything?" But I didn't catch her answer. Dad went down to the office and started banging on the door until the manager came out, and they talked for a bit. Dad finally came back, and everyone went back into their rooms. "Just some nut," said Dad, and told us to get back into bed and go to sleep. Yeah, right. Go to sleep? I stayed awake the rest of the night, completely wigged out over what had happened. Morning came, we got cleaned up and dressed and piled into the car. Dad took us for breakfast, and we made the rest of the trip to Green Bay talking about the weird guy in the bunny suit. I mentioned the crazy guy yelling at us about rocks, but my mom said that was probably just a coincidence. We got to my cousin's house and told them all about our trip, and it became a joke. Until Easter morning. When us kids woke up to look for Easter eggs around the house, and we also got our Easter baskets, my brother and I had a little surprise. Buried deep in the plastic green grass of our Easter baskets were 2 blood-red rocks. I swear to this day it was actually dried blood. My dad even sniffed mine and then just took them out of the house. Whoever that guy was in the bunny suit, he somehow knew which car was ours and put those rocks in there. My parents certainly didn't do it, and my mom had put them in a bag after making them up at home and kept them hidden from me and my brother. To this day, we never figured out that mystery, but it soured me on the Easter bunny. And to this day, whenever I see anyone wearing a costume like that, I get the shivers. What kind of creep goes to that length to scare 2 little kids? We never did find out. The Judas Burning by P.J. Hogue. I don't believe in ghosts, but having witnessed a most remarkable, altogether inexplicable event that happened to me when I was just 11, I've been persuaded at the request of a number of friends to document exactly what happened. This happened near the burial ground of the ancient church in Tuxteth. It was Good Friday, and I had gotten up early to see the Judas Burning, up against the wall of a derelict house in Charlecot Street. I say I, but I wasn't doing the burning. I was simply watching some older guys lighting an effigy. But, as is what happens when youthful recklessness abounds, it wasn't long before the police arrived, 2 of them on a motorcycle. Everyone scattered, but for some reason they decided to chase me. I must have run for miles when finally I got cornered by the 2 policemen. They had caught sight of me disappearing down a blind alley, and at the end of it found me cowering amongst a pile of bins and rusting barrels. One of the coppers informed me that Charlie, one of the older guys I had mentioned earlier, had told them that it was me who had started the burning. At first he was suspicious of the story, an older guy blaming somebody younger. But it wasn't long before the crowd of guys now gathered around him all began chiming in agreement that it was me who had started the fire. Anyway, I pleaded with the cop that I wasn't to blame, and after some questioning, he let me go with no more than a ticking off. I think both the cops had felt sorry for me. They could clearly see from my shaking and mumbling that I wasn't someone who was likely to be the ringleader of a gang of troublemakers, especially ones older than me. But still, I was quite upset that I had been implicated in any of it. By then it was getting quite late, so I set off to my house in Cockburn Street. I was proceeding leisurely on foot when, on passing the ancient church, my attention was suddenly arrested by the strange and uncanny appearance of its graveyards. The time was shortly after 10, and the whole burying ground seemed alive and glistening with 1,000 small bluish lights, like little flames which appeared to creep in and out of the different graves, as if the departed spirits were taking a late evening ramble. I stood petrified, not knowing what to make of it, but at the same time experiencing a feeling of horror which suddenly took complete possession of me. Just at that moment, the moon, which had up until then been obscured by clouds, seemed to come to my assistance, and it popped out, giving me a very short time the benefit of her companionship. And then, the most startling phenomenon of all appeared, a phenomenon which caused my hair to stand on end with fright, and a cold numbness of horror paralyzed me. Coming up the road, directly opposite me, was a funeral train. The coffin borne along with measured tread, covered with an immense black pall which fluttered up in the evening wind. At first I thought I was dreaming, so I pinched myself in the arm to make sure that it was real. Nope, I was not dreaming. I felt the nip, and therefore was satisfied as to my wakefulness. What does this mean? I asked myself, as the cortege eventually approached me, and I began to distinguish the general outlines of the bearers. All of them appeared to be nothing more than boys, and judging by their size, but they were still indistinct, just kind of like shadows of a human form. The most disturbing part of it was that they all bore walking sticks mounted with death's heads. One of the guys in the crowd of followers was walking just behind the coffin, and he was distinct for some reason in comparison with the others. Maybe that's what made me take special notice. He was dressed in what appeared to be a suit, black velvet. I remember the whiteness of his shirt standing out in marked contrast to the somber nature of his general attire. The face of this kid was deathly pale, as also were the faces of the others around him, but his face remained somewhat blurred in form. It just felt like there was something strangely familiar about it. But then suddenly, instead of the procession advancing to the gate at which I stood, it turned and entered the burial ground through another gate a few yards distance away. As the coffin went through the gate, all of the blue spirit lights seemed to rise from the graves as if to meet the cortege for the purpose of escorting this body to its final resting place. These awful lights added considerably to the ghastliness of the entire scene, as they began floating over the coffin and the heads of these other people surrounding it. The procession glided up the pathway, past the main entrance of the church, and then continued in a straight line, finally disappearing at the back of this edifice. Where that funeral was going to, or where it came from, I don't know. But I much distinctly know that that coffin, mortars, and lights, and even the pale flickering moonlight, all went away as mysteriously as they came, leaving me standing there in the dark, transfixed with astonishment and fright. I got myself together and took to my heels and didn't stop running until I found myself safe in my own house. Gotta be honest, I don't even remember how I got home. And after recovering a little from the shock of what I'd seen, I immediately woke up a relative who had retired for the night, and I told her about the above particulars. She told me I must have been suffering from some kind of mental hallucination, but seeing that I was really bothered by it, she came to the conclusion that what I had seen may possibly have been real. So the next day on her own, she made a bunch of inquiries around the neighborhood and found out from a very old woman that she remembered a story in her youth having reference to this mysterious and sudden death of an old churchgoer who was hastily and quietly buried at night in the old churchyard. Maybe this was just a ghastly repetition of that event for my special benefit, but I don't know why, or maybe it was foreshadowing of something coming my way in the future. Now, as I've said, I'm not a believer in ghosts, but this remarkable experience entirely upset all my previously conceived notions on the subject, leaving me in a quandary of doubt. On the evening which I saw that mysterious twilight funeral at the ancient church, I know I was wide awake. I had passed several cyclists on Dingle Lane with whom I talked to, and I likewise had refreshed myself at the public drinking fountain placed at the top of the mount. It's strange. Just a little ways further down the road, I encountered such a weird, ghostly experience. An experience I shall, to my dying day, never forget. And what of the burning of the effigies? Well, that dwindled out shortly after the war. Too many accidents, I suppose. One of the guys in the neighborhood got it not long after my encounter in the churchyard. The silly idiot had used petrol for the effigy burning. My dad read it in the papers, and it was a gruesome report saying that this kid's charred remains were found amongst the debris of the Judas that he was burning. I think it was Charlie. Dad said I went to that funeral, but I don't remember. Guy in the Bathroom, submitted by Alex. When I was a junior in college, I was home for Easter break. Most of my college friends had decided to go to the Caribbean for break, but I didn't have the money for it, so I just went home. My girlfriend was part of that crowd, and it had nothing to do with this story, but shortly after her return from the Caribbean, she was no longer my girlfriend, as I found out, and she admitted to cheating on me with a number of guys on that vacation. My parents had also gone on vacation, so I was home by myself, and I decided to invite one of my buddies over. I'll call him Kevin. We were just going to drink some beers, smoke a little weed, and watch the 10 Commandments on TV. Yeah, wild and crazy guys. So we came over around mid-afternoon with some pizza and wings, and we just hung out watching TV and playing PlayStation. I remember talking to him about wanting to break up with my girlfriend because I thought she was cheating on me. I mean, how's that for foreshadowing in my love life? He said I should do whatever I thought was right. His girlfriend ended up just stopping over for a few minutes on her way to a family get-together. They're married now, and she was really cool then, as she still is cool today. She had a beer with us, and I told her about my girlfriend, and she agreed. It didn't take much. She never liked my girlfriend anyway, but sorry about all this backstory. I'll get to what's really needed to be told now. After she left, we decided to fire up a bowl and got baked to the bejesus. I can't remember where I got the weed, but it was certainly a decent strain because I remember being really, really baked. So we were both stoned out playing PlayStation and laughing and having a good time, and at some point Kevin got up to use the bathroom. He came back into the room with a strange look on his face and said, "Who's the guy in your bathroom?" I immediately burst out laughing and said, "What the fuck are you talking about?" But I could tell after a second that he was serious. We both normally could handle our weed, and at that point I started to think maybe it had been laced with something. Now that I look back at it, it probably was laced with something because of that high that we had. I mean, it was very, very heavy, not like regular weed. Kevin just sat back down with another beer, and we played whatever baseball game we were playing. I got up for some more beers, and then also hit the head. And when I went to the half bath in our downstairs part of the house, I opened the bathroom door, and there was a man sitting on the toilet looking at me. He didn't look crazy or anything, but he certainly was out of place. He wasn't like all the other stories you hear about some gaunt-looking guy with crazy stringy hair and whatever. He just looked like some regular guy. I stood there looking at him for a minute while he looked at me. Then in my state of whatever high I was in, I said, "Oh, I'm sorry," and I closed the door. I went back to the living room and said to Kevin, "You're not kidding, there is a guy in the bathroom." He just burst out laughing at that point, and to this day I cannot figure out why we didn't do anything about it or take it seriously. Literally, we just laughed and had some more beer. At some point, I got really sleepy, and so did Kevin, and we did take a nap. We woke up before the 10 Commandments came on, and I looked at Kevin. We were both in clearer heads at this point, and I said, "Was there really a guy in my bathroom?" And Kevin said, "Dude, no way. I thought I saw somebody, but it's impossible." But then I pointed out to him that I also saw him. I mean, how could we have had the same hallucination if that's exactly what it was, a hallucination? I got up and turned the lights on, and then went to the kitchen to get some leftovers and a couple of more beers. And that's when I stopped dead in my tracks. My half-bath is in the hallway that connects our front door to the back living room and kitchen. On the floor was a set of muddy footprints going from the front door to the bathroom and then back. They weren't our footprints. Our sneakers were on the mat by the front door. "Dude, get over here," I said, and Kevin came over. "Holy shit," he said quietly. I went over to the bathroom door and opened it. No one was inside, but there were more muddy boot prints in there. And there was a note on the sink. In really childlike handwriting, the note said, "Sorry, you guys aren't my type. Thought it would be young ladies at home." I looked at Kevin, not knowing what to say. We went to my kitchen and got knives out of the knife block and then searched the entire house. No one was there. We didn't call the cops, we just locked the front door, checked all the other doors, and then had more beer. Kevin ended up staying over that night because I was so freaked out, and he was too. We never found out who that guy was, and we're thankful he never came back. Psycho on Easter, submitted by Raytheon. This went down when I was 13 years old. It was right around the time when most of the holidays and the stuff that goes with them was wearing off on me. I was into girls and rebelling as all teens do. You know, smoking cigarettes and sneaking out of the house, being a general pain in the ass. My family still got together with the little kids in our family for an Easter egg hunt every year on the grounds of an elementary school in our town. The school is surrounded by woods and fields, and my mom happened to be the principal, so we had all the permission we needed to be out there. I had 2 guy cousins who were there, Bill, also 13, and Angelo, who was 17. I looked up to Angelo as he seemed like the coolest guy I knew. He raced motocross, listened to all the coolest bands, he played guitar, always had a hot girlfriend. I mean, he just was the coolest guy. So while all the little kids were racing around looking for the Easter eggs that had been placed all over the back part of the schoolyard, Bill and I sneaked off for a smoke. There was a little path at the very corner of the schoolyard, and we went down there talking about how all the little kids used to say that Bigfoot lived back in the woods. We joked that maybe we would see him. We walked what we thought was far enough into the woods and then sat down on a log to have a cigarette, when a really deep voice asked out of nowhere, "Can I bum one of those?" We looked up, and standing about 10 feet away from us was a guy who sure as hell looked like Bigfoot. He was well over 6 feet tall, had crazy long hair and a massive beard. His sudden appearance made us both jump. Immediately, I got a bad feeling and said, "Sorry, these were my last 2, and I hit Bill in the arm as if to say, "Let's get the hell out of here." We both stood up, but this guy was really fast. He was right next to us in a flash, and he grabbed my arm. And I can't remember exactly what he said, but he said something along the lines of, "You'll make a fine piece of ass." I swung my arm at his, but it was like hitting a piece of tree. The guy started pulling me deeper into the woods, and I was just yelling, "Get the fuck off me!" Bill tried to swing at him, but the guy cracked him with his free hand, and Bill went flying. I fell down by this point, but the guy held on and started dragging me, saying, "Yeah, fight it. I like when they fight it." I screamed out again and caught Bill's eye. "Run!" I screamed. "Get help!" Bill took off after scrambling backwards on his ass, and I kept fighting the guy as best I could. I was kicking at him and yelling all kinds of cuss words, but he kept pulling me down the trail. I saw him trying to unzip the fly in his pants, and that's when it hit me that I was now all alone with this psychopath rapist. I grabbed for anything I could to hit him with, and I tried to break free from his grip. He just kept panting and staring at me, and I swear to God he was drooling. It seemed like everything was moving in slow motion, like in a dream, and I thought I heard some loud thuds. My eyes were still fixed on this creep when a shape came flying over me and flew directly into this guy. Both the shape and the guy went down onto the ground with a loud oof, and the guy let go of me. I thought I heard more loud footsteps, but I was just looking at this man and realized that my cousin Angelo was on top of him, pounding away at the guy's face. Somewhere in this melee, Ange had picked up a rock and smashed it against the guy's face, and he stopped moving. The other footsteps I heard, I realized, were my dad and my uncle who came racing up. My uncle grabbed Angelo, my dad grabbed me, and they both pulled us back away from the now still body of this guy. My uncle took a knee next to him, and he looked at my dad and said, "He's just knocked out cold." I got to my feet, and my dad asked if I was okay, and I nodded. I couldn't really speak. Angelo was trying to get at the guy again, but my uncle held him off and told him to settle down. Enough was enough. They told us to get back to the school, and then were right behind us. I kept thanking Ange over and over, and through heavy breaths he just said, "Not a problem, kid, not a problem. Still cool as fuck." We rejoined everyone, and the cops were called. The Easter egg hunt had ended, and everyone got to see the cops show up and go into the woods and haul this guy out. Turns out he was a known sex offender and had been living in a shack back in the woods for years. All the kids at school would see him prowling along the wood line, hence the Bigfoot stories. The guy was arrested. I was a little shook up, and Angelo became even cooler to me after that. Not the scariest story, I guess, but it was an Easter I'll never forget, and we all still talk about it to this day. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you'd like to hear narrated on this channel or my podcast, email it to unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. I do have to say, the Rocket Motel, I know where that place is. In a past life, I did PR for a couple of divisions of Caterpillar, and I've driven by that place. I looked it up. It's called something else now, but I remember that cheesy-ass sign, so a little blast from the past. Thanks for sending that in. If you haven't, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Share it with your friends. And of course, follow me on social media. All the links to that are in the description below. If you'd like to take your support a step further, find my Patreon page link in the description, and also visit my storefront at tpublic.com. Get yourself some Campfire Crew merchandise. Everyone, I hope you have an excellent Easter if you are celebrating it, and even if you're not, I hope you have a great day. Everyone, be excellent to each other. And until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.